The radiator in apartment 4B wasn't just making noise, it was screaming. It was a high-pitched, metallic shriek, like a kettle left on a stove until the water boiled dry and the copper began to warp. I stood in the hallway of the fourth floor, my heavy work boots planted on the worn parquet, listening. I knew that sound intimately. It meant the air release valve was painted shut again, or the internal washer had finally disintegrated under the immense pressure of the February freeze that had gripped the city for the last week. I adjusted the tool belt on my hip, feeling the familiar weight of the pipe wrench against my thigh. To the tenants of 412 Maple Street, I was just Carter, the super, the guy in apartment 1A who fixed the leaks, salted the sidewalk before dawn, and smelled perpetually of ozone and welding flux. I liked it that way. In reality, the deed to this 4-story brownstone was locked in a fireproof safe in my basement workshop, signed under Mitchell Holdings LLC. I had bought the place 3 years ago, but I kept my name off the mailbox. I had hired Apex Management to handle the day-to-day operations so I could focus on my metalwork, but lately they had been aggressive. I suspected they were trying to push out the rent-controlled tenants to flip the units, but my hands were tied by a nasty penalty clause in our contract. If I intervened as the owner without documented proof of their negligence, I'd trigger a buyout I couldn't afford, and I'd lose the building. I had to wait for them to make a mistake. I checked my watch. 7:15 p.m. I started to turn back toward the stairs to get the master key, figuring I could fix the valve before she arrived, when the heavy security door downstairs slammed shut. The thud echoed up the stairwell, followed by the rapid, angry click of heels on wood. Ruth? She appeared on the landing a moment later, breathless, her wool coat covered in a layer of fresh, dry snow. She was 38, a crisis PR manager who handled scandals for senators and CEOs. And she usually moved with the terrifying precision of a heat-seeking missile. Tonight, however, she looked like she had been shot down over enemy territory. She didn't see me at first. She was staring at the mail in her hand, specifically, a thick, cream-colored envelope with a red urgent stamp. She stopped in front of her door, 4B, and ripped the envelope open with a violence that made the paper shriek. She read it. Her knee buckled slightly, just a fraction, as if the floor had tilted. She reread the notice, her lips moving without sound, then pressed her thumb hard into her palm until the skin went white. "It's a standard form," I said, my voice low so I wouldn't startle her. She jumped anyway, spinning around, her hand flying to her chest. Her eyes were wide, dark, and rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. "Carter, you startled me. You move like a ghost." "Radiator," I said, pointing a thumb at her door. "It's screaming. I could hear it from the 3rd floor." "I was coming to check the valve. The radiator is the least of my problems," she snapped. The sharpness was automatic, a defense mechanism she wore like armor. She waved the paper at me. "Do you know what this is?" "Eviction notice," I guessed. I kept my face neutral. "Notice to vacate," she corrected, reading from the paper with a trembling voice. "Reason? Structural hazard. Unsafe balcony railing. Immediate lease termination for tenant safety." My jaw tightened. I knew that railing. I had forged it myself 3 years ago. It was solid steel, hand-hammered scrollwork anchored into the brick with chemical bolts that could hold a suspension bridge. It wasn't unsafe. It was the strongest thing in this entire building. Apex was fishing. They were fabricating safety hazards to bypass the lease protections. This was the breach I had been waiting for, but seeing it in her shaking hands made my blood run cold. "The railing is fine," I said. "Tell that to the paper," Ruth said, her voice cracking. She unlocked her door and pushed it open. The hissing sound from inside blasted out, hot and heavy. "I have 14 days. 14 days to find a place in this market. In this weather, while I'm trying to keep Senator Holloway's mistress from going on Good Morning America. And now my apartment sounds like a steam engine." She looked at me then, really looked at me. "Can you fix the heat, Carter? Or is that structurally unsafe too?" "I can fix the heat," I said. I followed her inside. Her apartment was immaculate, a showroom of white furniture, glass tables, and abstract art that looked expensive and uncomfortable. It was freezing. Despite the noise, the steam wasn't circulating, it was venting. I knelt by the radiator under the window. The paint was bubbling around the valve. I pulled the pipe wrench from my back pocket. I didn't force it. Metal has a grain, a temper. You have to listen to it. I tapped the side of the valve gently with the wrench handle. Clang. Clang. A vibration to loosen the sediment. Then, I wrapped a rag around the knob and applied steady, increasing torque. It groaned, resisted, and then gave way. The shrieking hiss cut off instantly, replaced by the deep, rhythmic thunk-thunk of hot water rushing into the cast-iron fins. "Give it 10 minutes," I said, standing up and wiping my hands on my rag. "The airlock will clear. It'll be warm soon." Ruth was standing by the window, staring out at the snow. She hadn't taken off her coat. Her bag was on the floor, spilled open, spilling files and 2 phones onto the white rug. "Thank you," she whispered. I watched her. I saw the way she was holding her ribs, hugging herself. It wasn't just the cold. It was the stance of someone who has taken a hit and is waiting for the next one. She was trembling, a fine vibration that shook the fabric of her coat. "You need to eat," I said. She turned, blinking, as if she'd forgotten I was there. "What? You're shaking. It's not just the temperature. Your hands are trembling. Low blood sugar. Adrenaline crash. You need protein." I walked past her into the kitchen. It was pristine. "Do you have food?" "I have. Wine," she said vaguely. "And olives." I opened the fridge. A bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, a jar of artisanal olives, and a box of baking soda. That was it. "I have a dinner meeting," she said, straightening up, trying to reassemble the ruthless PR executive persona. "I'm meeting the senator's chief of staff at Le Cuckoo at 8. I'll eat there." "Look outside, Ruth." She looked. The snow wasn't just falling. It was driving sideways, a white curtain erasing the skyline. The streetlights were hazy halos in the storm. "Trains are down," I said. "Bridges are icing. No taxis are running." "The mayor just declared a state of emergency." She checked her phone. She stared at the screen for a long time. "Cancelled," she murmured. "He cancelled. By text." She dropped the phone on the counter. The fight went out of her, leaving just the fatigue. She sank onto one of the high stools at the island, burying her face in her hands. "I can't do this," she said, her voice muffled. "I can't move. I don't have time to move. I have 3 press conferences next week. I have to vet the legal team. I can't be packing boxes." I stood there, feeling the familiar weight of the kind knife persona settling over me. Gentle words, lethal boundaries. She wasn't just stressed. She was at the breaking point where metal snaps. "Come downstairs," I said. She looked up, confused, her eyes red-rimmed. "To the basement?" "To my apartment. I have soup, roasted tomato and basil, homemade, and fresh bread. It's warm." She hesitated. Her eyes scanned me, the flannel shirt, the grease stain on my jeans, the boots. "I don't even know your last name, Carter. You've lived here for 2 years, and I don't know your last name." "Mitchell," I said. "And I promise, the only thing dangerous in my apartment is the hot sauce." "It's safe, Ruth. Just dinner. No agenda." She looked at me, assessing. She was a professional judge of character, paid to spin the truth, which meant she knew exactly what a lie looked like. She looked at my hands, resting calm on the marble counter. "Soup?" she asked, her voice small. "Soup," I confirmed. "And heat that doesn't scream." The walk down to the basement was silent. The building felt different in the storm, insulated and quiet. My apartment was the antithesis of hers. If 4B was a gallery, 1A was a cave. It was dug into the foundation of the building, the walls lined with exposed brick and dark, reclaimed wood. The ceilings were lower, the air thicker with the scent of wood smoke from the small iron stove in the corner and the metallic tang of the workshop that took up the back half of the floor plan. Ruth stood in the doorway, clutching her bag, looking out of place in her silk and wool against the industrial grid of my space. "Sit," I said, pointing to the leather couch that faced the stove. "The fire is real. The heat works." I went to the kitchenette. It was small but efficient, everything organized with the precision of a workshop. Knives on a magnetic strip, pans hanging by size. I ladled soup into 2 heavy ceramic mugs. I cut 2 thick slices of sourdough bread I'd baked that morning. When I turned back, Ruth was looking at the sketches pinned to the corkboard above my drafting table. Charcoal drawings of gates, intricate railings, abstract metal sculptures. "You made these?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "I designed them," I said, setting the mugs on the coffee table. "Then I build them." "The railing?" she realized, turning to me. "The one upstairs? The one they said was unsafe. It looks like this style? I made that railing, I said. 3 years ago. Solid steel bar stock, half-inch. Anchored with Hilti chemical epoxy. You could park a truck on that balcony. It's the safest place in the city. So, they're lying. They're leveraging, I said, sitting in the armchair opposite the couch. I kept my distance. Why 40? Stay at arm's length. She was cornered. Crowding her would make her bolt. They want to flip the unit. Safety is just the legal clause they're using to break the lease. Why do you care? She asked, sitting down and wrapping her hands around the hot mug. You work for them? You're the super. If they fire you? I didn't answer immediately. I took a sip of soup. The truth was complicated. I care about the work, I said finally. And I don't like bullies. Bully, she tasted the word, a bitter note in her voice. That's a nice way to put it. I usually call them clients. She ate the soup. Her shoulders loosened. The tremor in her fingers quieted around the mug. When she finally exhaled, it sounded like she'd been holding her breath since the lobby door slammed. The warmth of the fire, the food, the silence of the basement, it was finally giving her a place to land. I have to find a place, she murmured, staring into the fire. 2 weeks. It's impossible. The inventory in this neighborhood is 0. And with the storm, you don't have to leave, I said. The notice is a piece of paper. It takes months to evict someone in this city. You fight it. You're a PR crisis manager. Manage the crisis. I fight all day, Carter, she said, her voice heavy with a bone-deep weariness. I fight for liars. I fight for men who cheat on their wives and then ask me to write the apology speech. I spend 12 hours a day spinning straw into gold. I don't have any fight left for myself. I just want... I set the phone face down and slid a printed tenant-rights form across the table. Eat first. Then we fight on paper. She looked at me, her eyes heavy. I can't fight tonight. If I stop, the plates fall. Let them fall, I said. They're not your plates. Easy for you to say. You make things. You fix things. Your world is solid. My world is metal, I said. It's hard. It burns, but it stays where I put it. She finished the soup and set the mug down. She pulled the knitted blanket I'd left on the couch around her shoulders. The wind howled outside, a lonely sound that made the fire seem brighter. The storm is getting worse, I said. You can hear the wind in the flue. I should go upstairs. Pack. The heat hasn't stabilized yet, I said, and the wind is going to rattle those single-pane windows in 4B all night. Stay here. She looked at me, scanning for the trap. You're offering me your couch? I set an extra blanket on the couch and stepped back until the space between us felt safe. I'm offering you sanctuary. You can sleep here. Door stays unlocked. You decide. She looked at the fire. She looked at the snow piling up against the high basement windows, sealing us in. Okay, she whispered. Just for tonight. She fell asleep 10 minutes later, curled up like a cat on the leather. I covered her with a second blanket, tucking the edges in. I turned off the overhead lights, leaving just the small amber lamp by the door. I left one lamp on and kept my distance. I went to the back, to my workbench. I sat down and pulled out a pad of paper. I didn't sketch. I started drafting a letter to Apex Management. It wasn't polite. It was the kind knife. Regarding Unit 4B. The structural assessment is fraudulent. Retract the notice immediately. Proceed, and I'll terminate Apex for cause under the audit clause and notify council. I signed it, not as Carter the Super, but as Carter Mitchell, sole proprietor. The next morning, the world was white. The snow had stopped, but it had buried the city under 2 feet of silence. Ruth woke up looking disoriented, her hair a mess of static. She sat up, the blanket pooling around her waist. Coffee, I said, walking over with a mug. Black, no sugar. She took it, blinking. How did you know? I see your recycling bin, I said. Starbucks cups? Americanos. You pay attention, she said, taking a sip. She closed her eyes. Oh God. That's better than Starbucks. I grind the beans myself. She checked her phone. Her face fell. 40 emails. The senator is melting down. He gave an interview without prepping. He went off script. I need to be in the office. Let him melt, I said, leaning against the doorframe. You're snowed in. The roads aren't plowed. Even the subway is delayed. She stood up, folding the blanket with military precision. I have to go upstairs. I have to pack. If I'm getting kicked out, I need to start purging. I have 10 years of stuff in that apartment. Ruth, I said, don't. She held up a hand, palm out. Don't be nice to me, Carter. I can't handle nice right now. Nice makes me weak. I need efficient. I need ruthless. I can be ruthless, I said. Good. Then help me find a mover who works in a blizzard. She brushed past me, smelling of sleep and expensive perfume. The door clicked shut behind her. I waited 5 minutes. Then I went upstairs. I didn't go to her apartment. I went to the roof. The unsafe conditions cited in the eviction notice included the fire escape access. They claimed the doorframe was rusted and the landing was compromised. I knew it wasn't rusted, it was iced over. The scuppers were blocked, causing water to pool and freeze, jamming the door. If I cleared it, I voided one of their primary claims. I took my blowtorch and a heavy steel pry bar. The roof was a frozen wasteland. The wind whipped across the parapet, cutting through my jacket. I spent 3 hours up there. I melted the ice dam. I cleared the scuppers. I ground down the catch on the fire door so it closed smoothly. Then I welded a reinforcement bar onto the frame just to be sure. I worked until my hands were numb inside my gloves, until my breath was coming in ragged clouds. When I came down, I stopped at 4B. The door was open. Boxes were piled in the hallway. Books, clothes, lamps. Ruth was inside, pacing. She was on the phone. I don't care what the polling says. If he apologizes, he looks weak. If he doesn't, he looks arrogant. Find the middle ground. Pivot to the family values speech. She slammed the phone down on the counter. She saw me standing there, dripping melting snow onto her floor. You look like a snowman, she said. Fire escape is clear, I said, brushing ice from my sleeve. Latch works. Drainage is clear. Strike one for the eviction notice. She stared at me. You went onto the roof? In this? Safety hazard, I shrugged. Fixed it. She walked over to me. She reached out and touched the cold, wet canvas of my coat. Why? She asked. Because you're not unsafe, I said. The building is fine. The railing is fine. You're fine. She looked like she was about to cry. Her chin wobbled. I'm not fine, Carter. I'm drowning. I called 3 brokers. No one has anything available until April. I have nowhere to go. Move in with me, I said. The words just came out. They hung in the cold air of the hallway, stark and undeniable. She laughed. It was a sharp, incredulous sound. That's not funny. I'm not joking, I said. You live in a basement. You're the super. I have a spare room, I lied. It was a storage closet filled with scrap metal, but I could clear it in an hour. It's small, but it's warm. Carter. 14 days, I said. I proved I meant it about the roof. Let me prove I mean this. Stay with me until you find a place. Don't scramble. Don't settle for some overpriced shoebox in Queens. Just breathe. She looked at the boxes. She looked at the empty apartment that felt less like a home every minute. She looked at me. Why? She asked again. Why would you do this? Because you need a soft landing, I said. And I have a very comfortable couch. And honestly, I could use someone to tell me which tie matches my shirt. She let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. You don't wear ties. I might, I said, if I had a reason. She moved in 2 days later. It was awkward at first. She was used to penthouses and concierge service. I lived in a workshop. My life was loud grinders, saws, the radio playing classic rock. Her life was digital phones, Zoom calls, frantic typing, but we found a rhythm. I spent the first night clearing the storage room. I moved the scrap metal to the shop. I painted the walls a warm cream color. I built a bed frame out of reclaimed oak and wrought iron. I spent 12 hours on it, welding the scrollwork, sanding the wood until it was like silk. When she saw it the next evening, she stopped in the doorway. She ran her hand over the metal curve of the headboard. You made this? Last night? I admitted, leaning against the doorframe. It's beautiful. She looked at me. You're exhausted. Your eyes are red. I'm fine. You're an idiot, she said softly, but a talented one. We fell into a domestic routine that terrified me with how natural it felt. She would work at the kitchen table, fielding calls, putting out fires for the senator. I would work in the back, behind the welding curtain, watching the sparks fly. On Tuesday, the Apex inspector showed up, banging on the front door. He claimed he needed to check the electrical load for compliance. I met him at the door. I didn't yell. I held the doorway and cited the notice requirements until he left. Ruth watched from the window, silent. 2 days later, the inspector's compliance request was withdrawn in writing. One evening, a week in, she was pacing the kitchen. The senator had just resigned. "Good riddance," I said, chopping onions for dinner. "I failed," she said, leaning against the counter. She poured herself a glass of wine. "I couldn't save him. He didn't want to be saved," I said. "He wanted to be absolved. There's a difference." She looked at me. "You see everything, don't you? For a guy who lives underground?" "I see the stress fractures," I said. "In metal. In people. You can't weld over a crack, Ruth. You have to grind it out and start fresh. Do you see mine?" I put the knife down. I turned to her. She was wearing one of my oversized flannels, sleeves covering her hands. She looked like she could finally breathe. "I see a woman who carries the weight of the world because she thinks if she drops it, she'll disappear," I said. She went still. "And if I do?" "You won't," I said. She swallowed, then nodded once, like she'd finally set something heavy down. She stood up. She walked over to me. She stopped at the boundary line of the kitchen island. "I don't know how to rest," she whispered. "I've been running since I was 20. I'll teach you," I said. Lesson 1. Turn off the phone. "I can't." "Give it to me." She hesitated, then handed me her phone. I put it in the drawer with the silverware. "Lesson 2, I said. "Eat the risotto." She smiled. It was a real smile, reaching her eyes. "Yes, chef." The eviction deadline was approaching. Apex management sent a final warning letter, addressed to Ruth, threatening legal action if she wasn't out by Friday. Ruth looked up the city records and found a public PDF committee roster, Vance's name highlighted. "Vance wasn't a coincidence," she said, showing me the screen. "Apex's CEO also sits on the council's housing committee. That's why the notice moved so fast within 2 days." Then came the kicker. They threatened to forward confidential client emails obtained through an illegal access claim on the building's shared server to a tabloid unless she withdrew the complaint. That was the leverage I needed. Blackmail. It was time to end the game. On Thursday morning, I put on a suit. It was charcoal gray, tailored. I dusted the welding ash off my boots and polished them. Ruth was drinking coffee at the table. She stared at me. "Who are you?" she asked. "And what have you done with Carter?" "I have a meeting," I said. "About the building." "With the management company?" She stood up. "I'm coming with you. I'm not letting you fight my battles." "Ruth." "No, I'm the PR expert. I know how to spin. They're threatening my clients. This is my fight now." I looked at her. She was fierce. She was loyal. "Okay," I said. "Let's go." We drove to the Apex office downtown. The receptionist tried to stop us. Ruth charmed her way past in 10 seconds flat, dropping names of city officials until the gatekeeper folded. We walked into the CEO's office. Vance, the same guy who ran the council, was sitting behind a mahogany desk. He looked up, annoyed. "Who are you?" he demanded. "You can't just barge in here." "I'm Ruth Ruiz," she said, stepping forward. "And I'm representing the tenant of 4B. We're contesting the eviction based on faulty engineering reports." "And blackmail," Vance sneered. "The reports are solid. The railing is unsafe. The super probably botched the install." I stepped forward. "The super didn't botch anything," I said. Vance looked at me. He frowned. "You're the maintenance guy." "Carter. I'm Carter Mitchell," I said. I pulled a document from my jacket pocket. It was the deed. I threw it on his desk. "Sole proprietor of Mitchell Holdings, LLC. I own the building. Vance." The room went silent. Ruth whipped her head around to look at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Vance picked up the deed, his face drained of color. "Mr. Mitchell, we didn't know you were involved personally." "I live in the basement," I said, leaning on his desk. "I see everything. You tried to evict a tenant on a fraudulent safety claim. You insulted my metalwork, and you targeted a tenant with fraudulent claims. She has documentation and counsel now." "We were trying to increase equity," Vance stammered. "Market value?" My attorney will serve termination notice under Clause 14B, I said calmly. You'll be formally removed after the handover window. Get your files out of my system by noon. I turned to Ruth. She was staring at me like I was a stranger. Let's go, I said. We walked out. The elevator ride down was silent. The air was thick with unsaid words. When we got to the car, she exploded. You own the building? She shouted. You own the building? And you let me panic for 2 weeks? You let me pack my life into boxes? You let me think I was going to be homeless? I couldn't interfere directly without triggering a penalty clause in Apex's contract, I explained, my voice steady. If I moved too early, they'd win a payout, and I'd lose the liquidity I need to maintain the building. I needed them to commit a documented breach first. The blackmail threat about your clients was the key. It was strategy. It was cruel. She hit my arm. You lied to me. I omitted, I said, to protect the asset and to protect my peace. Your peace? She laughed, a bitter sound. What about my peace, Carter? I've been sleeping on your couch, eating your soup, thinking you were just this nice guy who fixed toilets. And you're a millionaire? I'm not a millionaire, I said. I'm a metal fabricator who inherited a building. And I'm still the guy who fixed your toilet. I can't do this, she said, backing away. I can't stay with you. The power dynamic. It's all wrong. You're my landlord. I'm your neighbor, I said. I'm your friend. I don't know who you are. She got in the car. I drove us home in silence. When we got back to the basement, she started packing her bag. Where are you going? I asked. I found a sublet, she lied. Ruth, stop. No, I can't stay here. It's too confusing. You make me breakfast. You build me a bed. You look at me like I'm precious metal instead of scrap iron. And I'm starting to rely on it. And I can't. I can't need someone who lies to me. I didn't lie about us, I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a key. It wasn't the key to 4B. It was a new key, brass, heavy, with a custom scrollwork bow I had filed myself. This isn't for upstairs, I said. She looked at it. What is it? It's for here, I said. For the front door. For the back door. For the workshop. Carter. Option A. You return to 4B under the same lease terms documented. Rent stabilized. I'll have the papers drawn up tonight. Option B. You take the spare room under a written roommate agreement. Either way, your housing is not conditional on anything personal. It's secure. She stared at the key. You own the building? It's just bricks, I said. You're the home. She looked up at me. The anger was fading, replaced by fear. I'm messy, Carter. I'm loud. I work too much. I like the noise, I said. It drowns out the quiet. I held out the key. I waited. She hesitated. Then she took the key. She traced the metalwork with her thumb. I don't want to go back upstairs, she whispered. No. It's cold up there. She looked at me. And the coffee is terrible. I smiled. I can fix that. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was strong. You fixed everything, Carter. Not everything, I said. I still need to hang your coat up. I took her coat and hung it on the hook by the door, then offered my hand. Come here. She stepped closer. She took my hand. I pulled her in gently, wrapping my arms around her. She smelled of vanilla and stress and home. I rested my chin against her temple. Stay, I said into the quiet between us. Okay, she breathed. I'm staying. 8 weeks later, I came home from a job site. It was late, snowing again. The streetlights were halos in the fog. I walked down the steps to the basement unit. The light was on. Ruth was sitting on the stoop, wrapped in the blanket I gave her, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. You're late, she said. Traffic, I said. Snow. I had to weld a gate in the village. Excuses. She handed me a mug. Drink. It's hot. I sat down next to her on the cold stone. We watched the snow fall in silence. I resigned today, she said casually. I almost choked on my cocoa. What? From the firm? I quit. I'm starting my own agency. Smaller. Ethical. No more senators. Just a people who need help. The kind of people who get evicted in a snowstorm. That's brave, I said. Risky. I learned from the best, she said, bumping her shoulder against mine. I figured If you can stand up to Vance, I can stand up to the board. Plus, I have a very affordable landlord. He's a tyrant, I warned. Demands payment in hot tea and shoulder squeezes? I can afford tea. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I put my arm around her, pulling the blanket tight around us both. I'm happy, she whispered. It feels weird. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Let it drop, I said. I'm wearing steel-toed boots. She laughed. It was a warm, settled sound. You're my person, Carter, she said. My solid ground. And you're my sky, I said. You let the light in. We sat there in the cold, warm together, watching the city turn white. Inside on the table, the new lease papers sat signed, right next to her business registration form. The foundation was solid, the walls were strong, and the door was locked against the storm. We spend so much time building walls to keep the world out, thinking that invulnerability is safety. But I learned that the strongest structures aren't the ones without doors. They're the ones where you choose who gets a key. Love isn't about finding someone who doesn't have baggage. It's about finding someone who knows how to help you unpack. If you like this story, please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.